Hey guys, today we're going to study opposite side castlings in chess. We see three important rules and we'll answer some common questions regarding this theme. Keep watching. So we will analyze this game between Paco Vallejo as white and Daniel Campora as black. The game was e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and then d4, Scotch game, e takes d4, knight takes d4. In this position, the two main lines for black are bishop c5 and knight f6. In this game, Campora is playing knight g e7. It's a side line, but it's playable. The idea is to capture and play knight c6. Vallejo plays knight c3 here, knight takes knight, queen takes d4, and knight c6. We have to move the queen to e3, bishop b4, and bishop d2. Black castles. We play a3 and the bishop has to take here and white takes on c3. Black plays d6 and at this point white is going to castle queenside. And here we're going to make a pause to analyze some general ideas about these positions with opposite side castlings. For example, we need to say that these positions will be sharp, dynamic, and there will be strong attacks on the sides of the board. As black king is not on the queen side, they can advance these pawns, and the same happens on the king side. White king is not here, so white can advance those pawns, and the idea is that there will be pawn storms to create weaknesses and open lines. Also, we need to say that the first player, in general, the first player arriving to the other king is going to be winning the game by attack. That's what usually happens in these positions. In the game, Campora plays queen e7, and here Paco plays g4. And here we have the first rule: don't be afraid to lose one pawn if you're opening lines against the enemy king. So moves like g4 or h4 are very common, even if you're losing a pawn, and almost always there is a very good compensation if the opponent captures the pawn. Actually, in this position we need to say that taking the pawn on g4 is just losing the game for black. Let's see, after bishop takes pawn, there is rook g1 attacking the bishop, but also there is a big pressure on g7. So here white is winning. For example, if bishop takes rook, we can capture on g7. After king h8, here we can take the queen. We said it's covered. Rook takes f7. But why would we take the queen when we can give mate? Like rook g8 is a beautiful move here. And after king takes, queen g3. Then the bishop can block with take, the queen can block, and this is checkmate. So in the game, black is going to play after g4 the move f6. I guess the idea with this move is to stop a little the bishop on the right diagonal. However, the move is dubious, and here we have the second rule for these positions, and it is don't move pawns on the side where your opponent is attacking. This is a very important rule in general in chess, not only for opposite side castling positions, but specifically here is very important because, as you know, the attacks will be very strong in opposite side castling positions. And when we move a pawn, we stop controlling the squares, so we're creating weaknesses. But it's not only about that. Also, when we move a pawn, we are giving our opponent a point to break. And when we have this break, then there will be opening lines here and lines over here. So that's the idea. We need to try to avoid this kind of moves. Only as a last resource we would be moving pawns if we don't have any other possibility. So white plays here rook g1 and black continues with knight e5. Then bishop e2 and the knight comes back to f7. White continues with the pawn storm, h4, and black plays rook e8, now with some pressure in the center. White needs to play here f3 and then h6. White plays here rook d2, which is a useful move because very often we can double rooks either in the center or on the king side, and black is going to play here bishop d7. There are some moves now trying to improve pieces like bishop c4, bishop e6, bishop d3, c5, bishop b5 attacking the rook on e8, the rook goes to f8, and then a4. Now white continues with the storm, and now there will be very soon a break either over e5 or over g5. Black plays a6, the bishop goes back to d3, and then black is going to play b5. They are going to start with their pawn storm. And here we have the third rule for these positions, and it is pay attention to extra tempos attacking minor pieces with the pawn storm. The idea is that very often one of the sides could be advancing pawns and attacking minor pieces, and this is a big problem for the other side, because then they cannot continue with the attack. They need to waste a move defending against the threat of the minor piece. This is something we need to include in our evaluation of these positions. Well, this is not going to be actually decisive here, because as it is more or less clear, the attack is extremely advanced here for white, and they are going to get there first. But it's something I think we need to mention, because in other positions it could be decisive. In the game, Paco continues here with e5, and there's something else we need to mention, and it is the two bishops here. So that's another good reason to break and to open lines. When you have the two bishops, anything breaking and opening lines and diagonal is going to be fine. So when white plays here e5, they're opening this diagonal, but also they're putting some pressure on this diagonal, so probably both of them will be open very soon. Black plays d takes e5, and then this move, queen e4, putting a lot of pressure on light squares. Light squares are very weak here. The knight is not on f6, protecting h7. Also, when we look at the pawns, they are all in dark squares, so they are not protecting light squares. So black plays here rook fd8 to try to escape out of the mate, and then f takes e5. We continue opening lines, f takes e5, and g5 with the same idea. We want to open lines, we want to break and create weaknesses over here. Black plays h takes g5, and then this move, rook f1. Now Paco is threatening mate in two moves. For example, if black plays something normal like say c4, then we have queen h7 and queen h8 with mate. So after rook f1, Campora plays king f8, but then queen takes e5. Now the threat is on g7, and then I cannot capture because there is a pin. So queen takes e5, and well, this position is already extremely difficult for black, and they are going to sacrifice the exchange to try to survive here. So rook d4, but then, well, bishop takes d4 is just winning the game. After c takes d4, then h takes g5. Now the threat is g6. So black is completely lost. They play here bishop a3, threatening the rook, also trading queens. But now we are going to simplify and get into an endgame, just winning with the exchange up. So queen takes queen, king takes queen, and rook e2 check. Black plays bishop e6, but now there is a problem. Bishop f5, and white is getting the bishop on e6. Knight takes g5, but then we trade, and well, black is going to play d3 first, but the idea with d3 is to be able to give some check and defend here on c6 at some point, but this is not going to change too much. So we capture, knight takes e6, and after rook e1 with a lot of pressure, now black can play this. But after king b1, rook c6, and d4, this is just winning. Actually, after king b1, this master Campora resigned here. But after rook c6, the idea was d4, and then we are forking, and this is just winning the game. For example, even if black plays rook d6, we can play d5, and we are winning anyway. Before we finish, I want to analyze these common questions I see very often, and they are: when do we want to castle on opposite side castlings? And also, what do we analyze when we are going to make this decision? Well, we're going to analyze first in this position and then also in general. In this position, I think Vallejo decided to castle queenside for some good reasons. One of them is he's controlling the center very well. Also, he has the two bishops, and they can create a lot of damage from the distance on the king side. And finally, these pawns on the king side can advance very easily, and it should be more or less simple to break and open lines in the next maybe 4 or 5 moves. That was in this specific game, but also in general we want to mention some other ideas. For example, if your opponent has an open file, maybe it's going to be a good idea to avoid the position with opposite side castlings, or the other way, if we have an open file over here and the attack could be very strong, then well, of course it's going to be very well to get into that kind of positions. Also, another thing is the pawn structure. If we have our pawns too advanced on that side, of course our king is not going to be safe. Then one more time, it could be fine to avoid the opposite side castling position. And finally, this idea we already mentioned in one of the rules, and it is include in the evaluation the extra tempos there could be by attacking minor pieces with the pawn storm. If you have any question about opposite side castlings, feel free to write it in the comments. I hope you have enjoyed this video. Help my channel with some like if it was like that. Subscribe so you get notifications for my next videos. Never stop believing. See you in the next.